Greetings, fellow moviegoers, and welcome to Movie Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and this is my pet gorilla, George. At this point, I'm really getting tired of the quality of these Superman movies. But for you guys, I pushed onwards as there's nothing else I can do except review. So, with that, let's get into the second to last of these movies. Superman 2, the theatrical version, was a big enough success for Warner Brothers that in the end credits of it, they teased Superman 3. Not only was the movie to be directed by Richard Lester, but also none of Richard Donner's original team, like Mario Puzo or John Williams, were involved. Yeesh, I'm already terrified. The movie was released in 1983, the same year and same summer as Return of the Jedi, National Lampoon's Vacation, and Cujo. Those were obviously the better movies to see that summer. Why do I say that? Because critics and audience alike hated this movie. Sure, it made some money, but not as much as the final Star Wars film, nor did it receive as much praise as Jedi got. Nowadays, people can still unanimously agree that maybe Superman 3 wasn't the greatest movie ever, but what are my thoughts? You're gonna find out today. This is Superman 3. The plot is. Well, I actually don't know. I guess you could say that Superman travels to Smallville again, because these movies actually decided to remember Superman's life again, where he reunites with Lana Lang, played by Annette O'Toole, 18 years before she played Martha Kent on the CW's Smallville. A childhood friend and crush. However, when an evil corporate businessman, played by Robert Vaughn, tries to take over the world with a satellite with the help of the nerdy Gus Gorman, played by Richard Pryor, it's up to Superman to do whatever it is he does. Oh, for Christ's sake, I give up. Writing this plot down makes me feel like I'm losing brain cells. This is beyond agonizing to me. I cannot stand it. At least with the other two movies, I could sit through it without feeling sick. This one I couldn't take seriously once. Once! From the first 5 minutes alone, we have a montage of some crappy slapstick, which is repeated multiple times throughout this one movie. The Donner stuff at least had only corny characters and corny set pieces. This movie goes all the way and makes even the movie hard to watch. The plot is so non-existent that talking about it now makes me feel dirty. So why don't we talk about something else, shall we? Now, in my previous reviews, I stated that I thought Christopher Reeve was perfect in the role. But here, because of the corny dialogue and by far some of the worst cinematic choices ever, we get a mere shell of who Superman was in the previous two movies. Does he have a bit of his personality? Yes. Is it fully fleshed out? Not at all. The only moments where Reeves shines in this movie is where he gives the photo to the kid in the beginning, every scene he has with O'Toole's Lana, and the fight scene he has with himself. But other than that, I didn't like Superman in this movie at all. As for the other characters, Lois has a 3-minute cameo, but she doesn't do anything. Not even anything stupid, so there's nothing to say. Perry White and Jimmy Olsen have little to nothing to do in this movie, much like Lester's version of Superman 2. And it kind of makes me wonder if Richard Lester didn't like these characters too much, so he wanted to cut them down so he didn't have to work with them. That's my thoughts. If you agree, great. If you don't, that's fine as well. Just an opinion. Our new romantic lead is Lana Lang, and to be honest, while I think Annette O'Toole is a really good actress and she put on the best performance in this entire movie, she doesn't scream Lana Lang. I mean, from what I've seen of it, Kristen Kruk did a good job as Lana on Smallville. The Jean Luen Yang story, Return to Glory, did a great job with her. And I guarantee that Bruce Timm and his team with the DC Animated Universe did a great job as well. O'Toole feels more motherly than she does love interest, which is why she's the perfect Martha on Smallville, again, from what I've seen of it. Lana does have a kid in this movie, and the kid did an okay job too, but again, I just felt very empty in regards to her. O'Toole's performance is great, but the character itself wasn't. Now we get to the villains, and calling them villains is an insult to that of even Arnold Schwarzenegger in Batman and Robin and Matt Smith in Morbius. You see, when the villains in a comic book movie are so bad compared to the two universally hated ones, you know that's a bad thing. First, we have Richard Pryor as Gus Gorman. Now, no disrespect to the late comedian. He can be very funny in this role. That said, what the hell was the point of his character? He's so over the top oblivious to everything that he becomes a villain. What? No, you can't do that. It's against the rules in many ways to do something like that. The only way it works is if you have a good writing and a good setup. Hal Stewart from Megamind is a prime example. He's oblivious to the fact that his crush, Roxanne Ritchie, doesn't like him, that he thinks that becoming a superhero will get her to like him, as she appeared to like Metro Man, which is revealed not to be the case. When Hal becomes Titan, he tries to make Roxanne fall for him, but she breaks his heart, which leads him on a downward spiral to become the supervillain we know. That is how you do it, not like how Gus Gorman did it. The actual villains aren't much better. The blonde chick is irritating because of that freaking baby voice. I hate baby voices when it comes down to celebrities. It's Britney Spears, it's Paris Hilton, it's Madonna. They all have the most obnoxious, stuffy voices on the planet. And I didn't think this was possible, but this character is an amalgamation of exactly that. At least the Big Bang Theory makes fun of that kind of obnoxious voice sometimes, and Bernadette is actually likable. But every time I hear a voice like that, I feel so irritated. Then we have the Websters. Ross and the sister whose name I can't remember. Ross is just like a less likable version of Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, and Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor is mediocre. Also, he's a very big political stereotype, which is a much bigger deal nowadays as studios constantly force in political references. But the fact that it even went on then is just baffling. As for the sister, I'm somewhat reminded of Frau Farbacina from Austin Powers, but much less funny. And she also turned into some weird robot thing at the end. I don't know which is worse, Matt Smith's dance or this weird robot crap. You know something's up when you have to ask yourself that question. For Christ's sake, this has been one of the longest rants I've ever gone on, and I'm not even done with the review. So I'm going to try to finish this up the best I can without losing my sanity. How are the effects? Well, surprisingly, they're pretty good. The pyrotechnics with the nuclear fire are some of the most impressive I've seen in a movie, and if they look good now, imagine how good they looked in '83. The flying effects are hit and miss most of the time, as you can see the grain around Superman, but again, it's still relatively new technology back then. As for the music, Ken Thorne returns, but this time I can't praise his work because this hardly uses John Williams' work. The main reason I listen to the music is for the memorable themes, but all I hear is a mediocre score. Ouch. And as for the action scenes, the only good one is the evil Superman versus Clark Kent. But what about the other ones? Well, they suck. And they suck hard. One of them is entirely narrated by Gus Gorman, which made me raise both my eyebrows in disbelief because I have never seen anything like that before. And the other one I want to talk about is the climax. Superman fights the villains who use a computer. Gus unplugs it, only for the computer to come to life and fight back. I mean, this is sort of like the only live action Brainiac we've seen on the big screen, but the fact remains that this is so over the top goofy that it actually made me take an entire point off my final score. So, overall, what did I think of Superman 3? Well, as you can probably tell, I hated it. Not only is it the worst movie in the franchise so far, but also one that the more I think about it, the more I dislike it. I initially thought this movie could get a 3 or a 2 out of 10, but upon reflection about the final action scene and all the other problems this movie has, I dragged the score down further to a 1 out of 10. And on top of that, this movie was so bad that it made me realize how much better the original Superman movie and the Richard Donner cut are. I previously gave both movies an 8 out of 10. I had raised the score of the first movie after watching the Richard Donner cut. But because of how bad Superman 3 is, I raised my score of these two movies to a 9 out of 10. And in case you are curious, the theatrical cut of Superman 2 gets an 8 out of 10 now. Jesus Christ, this movie was horrible. However, I am not out of the woods yet, as I have one more movie to cover in this franchise, which I'm not looking forward to in the slightest. However, for me at least, I get to take a break from this franchise until after Thanksgiving, as I am still taking next week off in order to honor the holiday. So tune in on December 1st to see the final Superman review for a while. With that said, my name is Mr. CCS, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next time, and wish me luck.